The morning my daughter-in-law told me I wasn't welcome at my own Christmas table, I was still wearing my apron. I had been up since 4:30 in the morning. The turkey was already in the oven. The cranberry sauce was cooling on the counter I had wiped down every single day for 31 years. And she looked at me calm as winter ice and said, "We didn't really plan this as your thing, Beverly. Maybe you'd be more comfortable upstairs." That was my kitchen, my house, my name on the deed since 1993. I stood there holding a dish towel, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Not because I was surprised. I think somewhere deep down I had known this moment was coming for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Let me go back to the beginning, because this story didn't start at Christmas. It started on a Tuesday in March, about 14 months before that morning, when my son called me from the parking lot of his apartment building and asked if he and his wife could stay with me for a little while. My son's name is Trevor. He's 36 years old. He has my late husband Gerald's eyes, that particular shade of gray-green that I fell in love with when I was 22 years old, and Gerald sat down next to me at a community choir rehearsal in Guelph. Trevor was born 2 years into our marriage, and he was the kind of child who made parenting feel like a gift rather than a responsibility. Curious, gentle, thoughtful in that old-fashioned way where he'd pull a chair out for you at the table and mean it genuinely. Gerald passed away 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. He was diagnosed in October and gone by February. Those 4 months were the longest and shortest of my life. After he died, I stayed in our house, the house we bought together when Trevor was 4 years old, the house Gerald and his brother spent a full summer renovating, the house where every wall had a memory painted into it. My neighbors asked if I was going to downsize. My sister asked if I was going to move closer to her in Hamilton. I said no to both. I wasn't ready to leave, and honestly, I'm still not sure I'll ever be ready. So when Trevor called that Tuesday in March and said things had gotten financially difficult, his contract position had ended unexpectedly, and his wife Sasha had just left her job to launch her own business that was still finding its footing, I said yes before he even finished the sentence. "Just until we stabilize," he said. "Maybe 3 or 4 months. We'll contribute to groceries, we'll help around the house. It won't be a burden, Mom. I promise." I believed him. He was my son. Of course I believed him. I want to be fair to Sasha, because I think fairness matters even when it's hard. When she and Trevor first started dating, I genuinely liked her. She was sharp and funny, and she had this direct way of talking that I actually admired. She didn't do the dance that some people do where they say one thing and mean another. She said what she thought. I respected that. When Trevor told me he was going to propose, I was happy for him. When they got married at a small ceremony at a vineyard outside of Niagara-on-the-Lake 4 years ago, I danced at the reception until my feet ached, and I meant every bit of the joy I felt. But I have learned, in 63 years of living, that people can be one thing in one context and something very different when circumstances shift. And circumstances shifted. They moved in on a Saturday in late March, with a rented van, 2 cats, and more boxes than I had expected. I had cleared out the largest guest bedroom, the one with the east-facing window and the attached bathroom that Gerald always jokingly called the suite. I had washed the curtains, put fresh flowers on the dresser, left extra towels folded on the bed. I wanted them to feel welcome. I wanted this to feel like family, because that's what it was supposed to be. The first few weeks were fine. Quiet, but fine. Trevor would make coffee in the mornings and we'd sit at the kitchen table together before Sasha woke up, and it reminded me of when he was a teenager, and we'd have those slow weekend mornings before the day got loud. Sasha would come down around 9 or 10, and we'd all have breakfast together. She was working on her business, some kind of online consulting for small retail brands, and she'd set up her laptop at the dining room table and work through the afternoon. It was manageable. I thought, this is going to be okay. The first thing that changed was small enough that I almost didn't register it as a change at all. I came downstairs one morning in early May to find that the throw pillows on my living room sofa had been rearranged. That doesn't sound like much, I know. But those pillows had been in the same arrangement for years. Gerald had bought 2 of them at a market in PEI on a trip we took for our 25th anniversary. I had hand-sewn 2 others myself from fabric I bought at a shop in downtown Guelph that closed years ago. They were exactly where I liked them, and now they were stacked differently. 2 of them moved to the armchair in the corner. I didn't say anything. I moved them back. I told myself it was nothing. 2 weeks later, I noticed that the small watercolor painting I kept in the hallway, a little winter scene that a friend had painted and given me as a gift the year after Gerald died, had been taken down and replaced with a large framed print I had never seen before, abstract. Lots of gray and dusty rose, not my taste at all. The watercolor was leaning against the wall in the coat closet, face in. I went upstairs and knocked on their bedroom door. Trevor answered, looking tired. "The painting in the hallway," I said. "My friend Patricia painted that for me. It matters to me. I'd like it back up." He looked uncomfortable. "Sasha thought it made the hallway feel a bit dark. She got that print at a pop-up shop. She's been trying to, make the space feel a bit more like home." I want you to notice the word he used, home, as if it wasn't already my home. "Trevor," I said, keeping my voice even, "I appreciate that she wants to feel comfortable here. But this is my house, and that painting has meaning to me. Please put it back." He nodded. He said he would. The print stayed up for another 4 days before Patricia's watercolor quietly reappeared. I didn't make a scene. I told myself, we'll find a rhythm. It takes time. But there was no rhythm. There was only escalation. By June, Sasha had reorganized my kitchen cupboards. I came downstairs to make my morning tea and couldn't find my favorite mug, the big hand-thrown ceramic one Trevor had made for me at a pottery class when he was 12 years old. I found it at the back of a high shelf I could barely reach, behind a set of matching white mugs Sasha had bought and arranged at the front. "It's just more functional this way," she told me when I asked. "The matching set looks cleaner. Yours is a bit uneven. It was taking up a lot of space." I looked at her for a moment. "My son made me that mug when he was 12, I said. "It lives at the front of the cupboard." She smiled in that way people smile when they think you're being irrational but don't want to say so. "Of course," she said. "Whatever you prefer." By July, her business had apparently grown enough that she needed a dedicated workspace. She asked if she could use my sewing room, a small room off the main hallway that I had set up after Gerald died, somewhere to work on quilts and alterations, and the kind of careful handiwork that kept my hands busy and my mind quiet during the hard years. I had a long work table in there, a proper lamp, shelves of fabric organized by color, my grandmother's old sewing cabinet in the corner. I said no. It was the first time I said it directly, and I could see from Sasha's expression that she wasn't accustomed to it. "I completely understand," she said, smiling. "No problem at all." 3 days later, I found 2 of her monitor screens set up on my work table. My fabric had been moved to the floor in stacked bins. My grandmother's cabinet had been pushed into the corner to make room for an ergonomic office chair. I went to Trevor. "She's really under pressure with the business," he said. He looked genuinely torn, and I wanted to give him credit for that. "It's just temporary." "That's my sewing room," I said. "We talked about this." I said no. "I know. I'll talk to her." He talked to her. She apologized. Her monitors stayed on my work table for 6 more weeks. I'm telling you all of this not to catalog every grievance, but because I want you to understand how it works. It doesn't happen all at once. If someone moved into your home and on day 1 started rearranging your things and taking over your rooms, you'd react immediately. Anyone would. But it happens slowly, one small erosion at a time, and each individual moment seems like it might not be worth a confrontation, and before you know it, you're standing in your own kitchen feeling like a visitor in someone else's house. By September, 6 months into what was supposed to be a 3 or 4 month arrangement, 2 things had become clear to me. First, they had no plan to leave. The financial situation had supposedly improved. Trevor had taken on a new contract, but there was no mention of apartment hunting, no mention of timelines, no mention of the arrangement we had agreed to. Second, Sasha had begun treating the house not as a place she was a guest in, but as a place she was managing. She bought a new kitchen rug without asking me. She replaced the hand soap dispensers in the main bathroom with a set she preferred. She had a conversation with my neighbor Doug about the fence between our yards as though she were the homeowner. She began making comments about the layout of the living room and whether the furniture might be opened up with some rearranging. And Trevor, my gentle, gray-eyed boy who used to pull chairs out for people, Trevor said nothing. Or when he did say something, it was in the register of a man trying to keep the peace, rather than a man who understood what was actually happening. One evening in October, I sat down at my kitchen table after dinner and I wrote a letter to Gerald. I do this sometimes, when things are heavy. I told him what was happening. I told him I didn't know what to do. I told him I missed having someone in the house who remembered that the house was mine. Then I put the letter away and I made myself a cup of tea in my son's handmade ceramic mug, and I started to think clearly. Because here is what I had not done and what I needed to do. I needed to stop waiting for permission to exist in my own home. I had been soft pedaling. I had been phrasing things as requests. I had been saying I'd prefer and if you don't mind and when you get a chance, and none of those phrases communicate a boundary. They communicate a wish. And wishes, I was learning, were easy to ignore. So, in November, I sat down with both of them at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, the one Gerald and I had bought at an estate sale in 1997, the one with the scratch on the left corner where Trevor had dragged his hockey bag across it when he was 15, and I said what I needed to say. I love you both, I told them, and I was glad to help when you needed it, but I need us to agree on some things. I had written it down. I had a piece of paper. I told them the sewing room was mine and was not available as an office. I told them that any changes to the house, any purchase that would change the appearance or arrangement of any room needed to come through me first. I told them that I expected the original arrangement of 3 to 4 months to have an actual end date attached to it, and I asked them to please look at apartments and give me a date by the end of the month. Sasha listened to all of this with her hands folded on the table. She nodded at appropriate moments. She said, "Of course, Beverly. We appreciate everything you've done for us." She was very composed, very polite. Trevor looked relieved, as though a difficult conversation he'd been dreading had gone better than expected. Nothing changed. The sewing room monitors were moved out, at least. But there was no apartment search. There was no end date. And in the first week of December, Sasha told me that she was planning a Christmas gathering. I thought it would be nice to have some people over, she said. My sister, her husband, a couple of friends from my business network. Low key. December 23rd. That's lovely, I said. I'll need to know who's coming so I can plan the food. She tilted her head slightly. Oh, I was going to handle all of that. You don't need to worry about a thing. I looked at her. It's my house, Sasha. I'll need to be involved in any gathering here. Of course, she said. I just meant I wanted to take the pressure off you. I want to tell you what happened on December 23rd, but first I want to tell you about December 22nd, because that day matters. I came downstairs in the morning to find that the dining room had been rearranged. My good dining chairs, 8 of them, dark walnut, bought piece by piece over 20 years because I loved them, and they reminded me of the kind of permanence that careful choices create, had been supplemented with 6 folding chairs from somewhere, and the whole table had been shifted to the center of the room to accommodate them. The sideboard where I kept Gerald's mother's china had been moved against the far wall to make more room. On top of the sideboard, arranged in a line, were a set of white pillar candles and some kind of minimalist branch and berry arrangement that looked like it had come from a boutique home decor shop. My centerpiece, the one I made every Christmas, a pine and pine cone arrangement with the small brass reindeer Gerald had bought me. The first Christmas we were married was on the floor next to the sideboard, sitting on a piece of newspaper like something waiting to be disposed of. I stood in the doorway of my dining room for a long moment. Then I picked up my centerpiece, placed it carefully back at the center of my table, moved the white candles to the sideboard, and went to make my coffee. Sasha came downstairs at 9:30. She walked into the dining room. She walked back out. She stood in the kitchen doorway. I had that arranged a specific way, she said. I know, I said, and I moved it. My brass reindeer go on my table at Christmas. They always have. She pressed her lips together. She went back upstairs. Trevor came to find me an hour later. He looked tired in the way he'd been looking tired for months, the specific fatigue of a man who has been standing between two people he loves and doesn't know how to stop doing it. "Mum," he said. "Trevor," I said, "I'm not having this conversation. Tomorrow is my Christmas gathering too, in my house. My centerpiece stays." He nodded. He didn't push back. I took that as something, even if it wasn't enough. The guests arrived the next evening at 6 o'clock. Sasha's sister Pam, who I had met twice before and who had always been perfectly pleasant. Pam's husband Greg, who shook my hand warmly and asked how I was doing with what seemed like genuine interest. Two women I hadn't met, colleagues or friends from Sasha's professional circle, young and well-dressed and perfectly friendly in that surface way of people at a party where they don't know everyone. I had been up since 4:30 that morning. I had made a turkey. I had made 2 kinds of pie. I had made the cranberry sauce from scratch the way my mother taught me. I had polished the good glasses. I had set the table with the placemats I'd embroidered myself and the walnut-handled cutlery Gerald and I had received as a wedding gift. I was still wearing my apron when Sasha came into the kitchen just before the guests arrived. She looked me over the apron, the oven mitts, the reading glasses pushed up on my head, and something crossed her face that she didn't quite manage to hide. "We didn't really plan this as your thing, Beverly," she said, calm, even like it was a reasonable administrative clarification. "I thought you'd probably want to relax tonight, maybe have a quiet evening upstairs." There it was. In the house I have owned since 1993. At the table I sat every Christmas for 31 years. After 4.5 hours of cooking, she looked at me and told me I might be more comfortable upstairs. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment, because I think it matters. I didn't feel the anger you might expect, that hot, immediate surge that would have had me slamming something down and raising my voice. I felt something colder, something very clear. It was the feeling of a door closing, and on the other side of the door was every excuse I had made, every conversation I'd softened, every time I'd said, "I'd prefer," when I should have said, "This is not negotiable." I took off my apron. I folded it neatly on the counter. I walked out of the kitchen, but I didn't go upstairs. I walked into the dining room where the guests had just begun to settle, and I pulled out the chair at the head of the table, my chair, the one I have sat in at every Christmas dinner since Gerald died, the one I sat in before that when he sat at the other end and I sat down. Sasha appeared in the doorway. Her expression was controlled, but her jaw was tight. "Beverly." "Pam," I said, turning to Sasha's sister, "it's so nice to see you again." "Greg, how is the renovation going on your place? I remember Trevor mentioned you were redoing the basement." Greg's face relaxed immediately. "Oh, it's finally done. What a process." "Beverly, do you know how long drywall takes to—" And the conversation moved, the way conversations do when someone redirects them with intention, and Pam started telling a story about their contractor, and one of Sasha's colleagues asked about the cranberry sauce because it smelled unbelievable, and I answered every question and laughed at every appropriate moment and did not look at Sasha standing in the doorway until she quietly moved and took her own seat. Dinner was served. My turkey, my cranberry sauce, my pies, and I sat at the head of my table. After the guests left, after the dishes were done, I did the dishes, because it was my kitchen and I find washing up after a good meal to be one of the more meditative activities available to a person of my age. I went and sat in the living room. Trevor came and sat across from me. Sasha stayed in the dining room. I could hear her moving around, probably rearranging something. "Mum," Trevor said. He stopped, started again. "I didn't know she said that to you." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." "Trevor," I said, "I need you to hear something, and I need you to really hear it, not just manage it. This is my home. I have been kind and patient, and I have genuinely tried to make space for both of you. But I cannot keep doing that if the space I'm making is being filled with disregard. I can't." He was quiet for a long time. Outside, a car went past with Christmas music faintly audible through the window. "I know we've overstayed," he finally said. "I think I've been avoiding it because—" He stopped. "I don't know. It felt easier to stay." Easier than what? Than figuring out what Sasha and I actually need to figure out. I looked at my son, and in that moment I understood something I hadn't let myself see. The difficulty between Trevor and Sasha was not only about my house. There was something in their own marriage that was unresolved, and staying in my house had given them a way to not resolve it. My space, my patience, my cooking, my constant presence as the thing to navigate around it had all functioned as a kind of filler, something to focus on instead of each other. That was not something I could fix, and it was not something I should have to contain. I love you, I told my son. I will always love you, and I'm going to need you both to find your own place by the 1st of February. That gives you 5 weeks. I'll help however I can. I'll look at listings with you. I'll contribute to your first and last month if the finances are still tight. But the 1st of February is the date. He nodded. He didn't argue. I think, in some part of him he hadn't been able to access in a while, he was relieved. They moved out on January 28th, 3 days ahead of the deadline. I don't know exactly what conversations happened between Trevor and Sasha in those 5 weeks, and I didn't ask. They found a 2-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from me, in a neighborhood with a good coffee shop on the corner and a park nearby. When they drove away with the rented van for the second time in less than 2 years, I stood on my front porch in my winter coat and watched until they turned the corner. Then I went inside. I put Patricia's watercolor back in the hallway, in exactly the spot it had always lived. I moved my ceramic mug to the front of the cupboard where it belonged. I opened the door to my sewing room, and I stood in it for a moment, breathing in the particular smell of fabric and old wood that I had missed without entirely realizing I was missing it. I got my grandmother's cabinet back into position. I sorted my fabric back onto the shelves by color. I sat down at my work table and I started working on a quilt I had been planning since the fall blue and cream, a pattern called Flying Geese that I had made once before as a young woman and always meant to make again. It took me most of that first evening back to myself to get the pieces cut and organized. By the time I was done, it was past 11 o'clock, which is late for me. I made chamomile tea in Trevor's handmade mug. I sat in the kitchen in the quiet. My house. My quiet, my mug. Trevor calls me twice a week now. We talk longer than we used to. Actually, without the strange static of the situation that had built up between us, there's more room for the conversation to be real. He told me last week that he and Sasha have started seeing a counselor together, which I think shows a kind of courage that I hope serves them well. I haven't pressed him on the details. That's their life to live. Sasha texted me in February, a short message. She said she knew things had been hard, and she was sorry for her part in it. I thanked her. I meant it. I hope she figures out what she needs. I just know now that she cannot figure it out in my house. My sister came to visit in March. We sat at my dining room table with the walnut-handled cutlery and the cranberry tea she likes and the lemon loaf I make from our mother's recipe, and we talked for 4 hours. She held up one of the embroidered placemats and said, "You made these, didn't you? In what, the 90s?" And I said yes. In 1998, the winter Gerald's mother was ill, and I needed something to do with my hands in the evenings. "You keep everything," my sister said, not critically, but the way you say something that's simply true. "I keep the things that matter," I told her. The Flying Geese quilt is almost finished now. I work on it most evenings, at my work table, under my good lamp, in the room that is mine. When it's done, I think I'll give it to Trevor and Sasha. Not as an apology, and not as a statement. Just as a quilt, made with careful hands, offered from a place of genuine hope for them. But it will be made in my sewing room, in my house, on my schedule. And that, I have learned, is not a small thing. That is everything. If there is something I want to leave with you, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever version of this story you might be living, it's this. The moment you let someone redefine the boundaries of your own home without speaking up is not the moment they take something from you. That moment always comes earlier, and it's always smaller than you'd expect. It's a pillow moved, a painting taken down, a question not asked. And if you let those small moments pass in silence because you love someone, or because you want to keep the peace, or because each individual thing seems too minor to fight over, the accumulated silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to say, "This is my home, and this is not negotiable." You are allowed to say it kindly and clearly and without apology. Love does not require you to dissolve yourself. Generosity is not the same as surrender. And protecting the life you have built for yourself, the rooms, the objects, the routines, the quiet, is not selfishness. It is the basic dignity of existing in the world as a full person rather than a convenience for someone else's comfort. Set your boundaries early and say them plainly. You don't have to be unkind. You don't have to be rigid, but you do have to be clear. Because the people who love you, who genuinely love you, will respect a clear boundary. And the people who won't respect one are showing you something important. Your home is not just an address, it is the shape of your life. Tend it accordingly.